welcome back to Morning Cup. I'm so honored today because I have Whitney Coupland with me, and Whitney is a certified nutritional practitioner and life coach. She has one-to-one online coaching practice where she helps those with autoimmune disease or chronic illness reclaim their health so that they can start feeling like themselves again. Whitney resides in Vancouver, Canada, with her husband, 2 kids, and their dog named Fuji. Thank you so much for being here today, Whitney.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so honored to have you here today because this is something that's so important. Even the channel is all about the mind-body connection and all of my research on mind and body connection, but I love what you do and your journey. I would love for others to hear what you've been through, how you got here today in a nutshell, and then we'll dive right in.
Sure. So I started with my knowledge on autoimmune disease at a young age around 13. I received my first diagnosis for not a very serious autoimmune condition. It's called Raynaud's syndrome. And I would basically lose circulation whenever I would get cold. So my extremities would become white and numb and super uncomfortable. And at that time on my health journey, there wasn't a lot being talked about. We're talking like over 20 something years ago. Yeah. This diet and lifestyle stuff was not in the forefront. And so I was basically just told it wasn't serious, avoid the triggers, which was avoid being cold and kind of live your life. From there, several years later, in my early 30s, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is another autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid gland. And I knew things were a little more serious with that diagnosis. So I really started diving into perfecting my own health as the best I could. I know perfect is like an unattainable situation, but I really wanted to just kind of go into the nooks and crannies and see how can I up level in different areas of my life to improve my health. And I've been a nutritionist since 2012. But before this second autoimmune diagnosis, I didn't necessarily have a niche or an area of focus in my nutrition practice.
Yeah.
Now, due to my own personal journey, I specialize in helping people with autoimmune conditions.
And what are autoimmune disease? What is that? So people who are listening that have never heard of it, they can understand a little bit more.
So an autoimmune disease occurs when these cells start to develop in your body, or antibodies, but we call them autoantibodies in autoimmune disease. And our bodies don't necessarily know how to shut this process off. Yeah. So autoantibodies can impact any part of our body, so any system. And that's why there's now around 140 different conditions that can be considered autoimmune in nature. So some familiar ones would be like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. The one that you can see visibly on the skin, psoriasis or vitiligo. There's so many of them out there. And what I find is that many people are suffering with the symptoms that lead up to a diagnosis. So they're not really at that breaking point where their body's in full-fledged attack mode and they are getting a diagnosis from their practitioner or their doctor, but they are experiencing the undesirable fatigue, low energy, digestive and skin discomforts, and that kind of thing leading up to an autoimmune diagnosis.
Absolutely. And what causes autoimmune disease?
That is a question that hasn't totally been answered by research, but we do know that diet, lifestyle, environmental triggers, so things like bacteria, viruses, stressful events, they all play a role. And it's really a perfect storm of multiple different things in your life that are going to result in, the symptoms that eventually turn into something bigger like autoimmune disease.
That's so true. And I'm curious too, how do people get a diagnosis? Because I know so many individuals that have struggled with their health and told repeatedly by different doctors, or just saying, oh, it's normal, or this is the age, or anything along those lines. But how do people get that diagnosis?
So this is also a bit of a tricky area because there's like, give or take 5 years is kind of an average for getting an autoimmune diagnosis. And it's a really high statistic of how many people get told that they're hypochondriacs or that it's all in their head when they're experiencing these symptoms, that their doctors can't seem to put them neatly together to come up with a diagnosis. So they're like, oh, it must just be, you're making it up kind of thing. But my tips are to know your family history, because there is a genetic component. It's not to say that if somebody in your family has an autoimmune disease that you're going to get it. It's not genetic in that sense. It's like a smaller component of a genetic, say 1/3, where we talked about, diet and lifestyle playing a role, your environment playing a role, and then your genetics playing a role. So if you know your family medical history, that can help lead to some clues as to what might be going on. Knowing that doctors are super important and they play a major role in helping us through our autoimmune, journey. But at the end of the day, you are your own decision maker. And if you think something is not right, then you have to trust your instincts. And you can fire a doctor and move on. I know it's easier said than done because there's limited doctors available. But if you, in your heart of hearts, know something isn't right, do your best to find a practitioner that will listen to you. Make requests for testing, because sometimes it won't be offered to you.
Right.
But if you have done your own research, or you know somebody with a similar condition, you can pick their brain and kind of come up with some questions to ask your doctor and some requests to ask of your doctor. They're not superheroes, we need to have a bit of input there. And then the final thing is like perseverance, really, like faith and perseverance, because if you don't have that, there are so many points on your journey where you will feel like giving up.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And once people do get a diagnosis, what do they do with that diagnosis?
So if you get a diagnosis, of course, through the medical system, you're going to want to know what is available. What is there further testing that needs to be done? Are there any related issues that could be going on? What medications are available? Do you require surgery or any other therapies? And from there, you're going to want to take personal responsibility for your health and for your body, and start doing things like the dietary changes, the stress management, those types of things, which if you run it by your doctor, they may or may not give you positive feedback on that. But that's again where you need to take your personal responsibility and your inner knowing and say, these things do make a difference for me. So I'm going to do what feels right and, make those changes.
I think that's important. It's important lifestyle changes and everything along those lines. But I kind of want to jump back to your business aspect. And when you started your business, what was that initial thought of, I want to start creating my own business, and what that looked like moving forward?
So I guess back in 2012, when I finished my nutrition program, I wanted to start my own business then. Little did I know it would take a lot more life and experience working with people to really understand what the needs are and how I can kind of fill that gap. So when I first started, I was offering small packages, like a 1-hour session, intake session, where they would receive this big, PDF with all of this information and then a follow-up. And I so quickly noticed that it was overwhelming for people. And it was going to take more time than just a session and a follow-up to get any type of results. At that point in time, I was not working with the autoimmune population. So I was thinking, quick fixes, we can get this done, no problem. But I learned very quickly otherwise. But yes, after my own few years going through the system with an autoimmune diagnosis and working with alternative practitioners like naturopaths as well, I realized that there was definitely a gap in between going to a doctor or an alternative practitioner, getting information, and then going home and actually applying it in a way that feels good for you as a person so that you can actually keep going with it. So that it's a long-term lifestyle change rather than like a means to an end. And you're looking at the calendar and you're like, how many more days of this? And you're trying to cross off your days of your diet. I didn't want it to feel like that for people.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to have a chance to ask questions. Why should I be taking fish oil every night? Why is meditation a good way to like minimize stress? These types of things where our doctors and practitioners who work on an hourly rate with you might not have enough time to flesh out that information.
That's true, because it's not just one element. It could be one thing triggering it, but it's all the things that we're putting in or digesting, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally too, and just being able to really fine tune that for each individual client. It sounds like for what you have been able to create.
Yes, exactly.
That's beautiful. And when you did start growing your business, what were maybe some of the roadblocks you experienced where it started to shift things or you just really learned along the way?
Yes. So as hard as it is to admit, it's something along the lines of, it's not about me, it's about them. So showing up in service to them, what do they actually need? And when I put my ego aside and showing up in a certain way aside, and just thought to myself, somebody needs me today, what did they need to hear? Everything started flowing a lot easier. Because I had a huge complex about social media. I did not want to show up on social media, not even because I'm like, oh, I don't like the way I look when I show up or people are going to judge me. I still to this day can't really put my finger on it. I think I still judge it as superficial and, you know, not everybody has your best interest at heart out on social media. So it's a little bit tainted for me that way. And I'm still working through that. But knowing that it's for the good of others.
Yeah.
And I just need to leave my stuff at the door is what really helped me move forward.
I love that you were able to move forward because at the same time, when you think about it, you have such a strong message, and being able to help impact those people that need to hear the message, that are struggling in these areas with chronic illness, autoimmune disease, things that aren't talked about enough, and being able to really relay that information to the people that need to hear it, knowing that they're not alone too.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it. But I'm curious, I know you've had a lot of clients, but do you have one or two success stories of clients you could share with us today of how you've really been able to help them help themselves?
One really stands out, a client that was in her 60s at the time. She had been suffering from ulcerative colitis. So that affects your intestines. So she'd been struggling for quite some time with this, and it was getting quite severe, where her doctors were saying, you know, your next step is immunosuppressant drugs. And she really didn't want to go that route. So I actually met her in a online business marketing, thing. She's also working on her own business. And so she knew what I did, and she reached out to me. Yeah. And I got her started on the autoimmune protocol, which is a diet and lifestyle approach to managing autoimmune or chronic illness. And so it's like paleo style elimination diet, where you really get to see what works for your body and what doesn't. And then alongside the diet, you're managing your stress and you're doing moderate exercise. You're getting to bed at a decent hour, things like that, but all very manageable and baby steps. And within 6 weeks, she was so significantly better. We don't like to use the term remission when we talk about autoimmune disease, but we talk about like living symptom free. So by 6 weeks, she was well on her way to reduce symptoms. And by the end of our 12 weeks together, she was living fairly symptom free day to day.
Wow, that is incredible. And just the transformation also, being able to have no symptoms, feeling that difference, because I know that's a huge part of your program too, is the lifestyle element, the habits that people are forming day in, day out. And I think that's just so important to recognize too, because it's a sustainability aspect as well. Because
Yes.
once you have that, you can move forward, you can do these things, but it's being able to reduce those symptoms or removing them completely. So I love that you touched on that, because I think it's amazing what you're able to do for your clients, especially just reclaiming their health, as I mentioned earlier, reading your bio, but just amazing things that you're able to do, especially our health, that like if we don't have our health, we can't do any of the amazing things we want to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
But looking at your journey thus far, what has been maybe 2 or 3 things that you could give us tip wise that you wish you would have known when you were starting your business that you know now?
I think again, it comes back to mindset. And when I learn things through business coaches or business programs or health programs, I feel like it's the same advice, because it's like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so one thing is asking for help. I've always been a person who prides myself on doing it myself and like feeling some sense of accomplishment or something if I'm able to do it all alone. So that is one thing, being able to ask for help in whatever area of life or whatever capacity that looks like for you. Maybe it's asking something of your partner to help a little bit more with something around the house. Maybe it's at work and you need to help with delegation, something like that. So just asking for help. That's probably the first one. And what would my second one be? Again, back to my personality. When I first started doing the autoimmune protocol diet, I'm doing it cold turkey. So there's a couple of approaches you can take. You can do the all in, all or nothing cold turkey approach, or you can do a phased approach where, you know, you take the time to plan and prepare and you start to eliminate and add things over the course of 6 weeks. I'm like, no, not for me. I'm going in cold turkey. And yeah, definitely didn't make it past like the 2 week mark, because I found I was missing certain like food groups and flavors in my diet, and it wasn't sustainable. So knowing that it's okay to take it in incremental steps, and in some cases you might get your desired result faster that way than doing, you know, all in full force falling off the wagon, and then again all in full force falling off the wagon. It's like slow and steady wins the race.
Yes, those are amazing tips. And you're right. It's about not doing it alone too, and just having that help, because I'm very similar to you. And I know a lot of people that are very similar to us of asking for help. It's hard. There's different reasons why we don't, and especially in the beginning, but being able to know that it's only going to help you if you're asking for help in different ways. It could be growing the business, having extra help at home, delegating. So it's not all on you, because that is too heavy to carry if you're trying to do it all.
Yes.
And just being able to recognize too that it is those baby steps, each part of growing a business or being able to have certain programs created. It's the baby steps that actually help you along the way versus going full force. And I mean, I've learned hard ways a lot of times of just not being able to accomplish things because of that. Is thinking, okay, I'm just going to do it all, and then realizing I have to backpedal a little.
Yeah. And I think for this type of personality, it's like you can hear the advice out the yin yang, right? And you
Yes.
have to kind of experience it for yourself. And that's okay too. Like if you want to go in and experience it for yourself, see what you're capable of, just knowing that failure is a part of the process and not letting it set you back.
Exactly. Because if you're not failing, you're not trying, because not everything works out perfectly. It never does, but it sometimes works out better than we could have imagined if we allow it to. So just going back to, because I know you have 2 kids, what has been your aspect of balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship?
Yes. Again, a little tricky work in progress. What I'm trying to do is work within my work hours and then let my brain be free from work after work hours. And what I mean by that is I used to always like have one headphone in listening to a podcast, like while I'm prepping dinner or, or like right after I put the kids to bed, I'm like right back on the computer. So it's being smarter with my work hours. And I know like we might talk about books at the end, but I recently read a book called Essentialism. And it's about what are the essential activities that are actually moving the needle. So he's talking about it a lot in relation to business and goals. I like to now use it with my clients and say, what are the essentials when it comes to your health? Do you really need to be doing every single thing out there, right? Or can you say, I'm going to pick a couple of things to focus on for now, the things I think are going to give me the biggest bang for my buck, and go from there. And I think when it comes to being a parent and running a business, you really need to think about that in all the different areas of life. What are the essentials? If I give my kid 20 minutes of undivided attention, that's better than 3 hours of me like half paying attention to them.
I love it. It's the intentionality of it too, right? Just being present, being in the moment, and understanding too that quality time you can never get back, but also just having that awareness too of how like listening to the podcast, but cooking and like multitasking. Like a lot of people multitask, and there's nothing wrong with multitasking, but it's really of where the priorities lie. And I'm a firm believer in that too. I've had to learn the hard way. Like I said, like sometimes you just have to learn it from our mistakes or failures or anything, but it's being able to keep moving forward. And I know we kind of touched on it earlier, but mindset, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. How does the mindset impact just our health and how that goes about, especially with your clients, but also as you've been growing your business too?
Something I've been thinking about lately is the actual mindset of just being a person with a diagnosis. Like, how are you thinking about yourself as an individual? Are you defining yourself by your illness? Like, hi, I'm Whitney Coupland. I have 2 kids, a dog, and an autoimmune disease. Like it's not really how you want to go about your life. And I think a lot of people really live in that identity. So it starts at the level of identity that my body is a healthy and capable body. It's showing me that something is not in alignment, and it's giving me clues so that I can do something about it. And so thinking about it from the sense that like my body is working for me rather than working against me. And if you hear my terminology at the beginning of this video, I'm trying my best to change this terminology, but the medical system will say like your antibodies or autoantibodies are attacking you. So it's like my body is attacking itself. And we really need to get away from using that attack word, where we're reframing to say the body is just giving me clues that something's not right. And I need to be doing some self-exploration to change that. So that's part of it is the identity. And then there's the whole practical day-to-day life of doing things differently than the rest of the people around you. So managing your expectations of yourself and managing your expectations of others. I know a lot of the time people with chronic illness are looking outside of themselves for validation. And they're also looking for people to, I don't want to say feel sorry, because you're like, oh, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. But they do want to be acknowledged as having, a harder time in life for some reason. Like, don't think that it's just as easy for me to go through life as it is for you. Kind of like a little like chip on the shoulder thing. So I work on that with my clients as well, so that they can start to live from an empowered place and taking their own personal responsibility rather than always looking for things externally.
I really appreciate you bringing that up too. And you mentioned something about like others as well, the ones around you. How do you manage social situations when it comes to just having an autoimmune disease, how that can impact your day-to-day life? I know we kind of touched on it, but if you could dig a little further with that.
Yeah, so planning and preparing is key, Because if you are eating differently than the people around you, you're going to have to know, if you're going to a restaurant, what kind of food is being offered on the menu, calling in advance to make sure there is something that you can have. If you're going over to a neighbor's house or a friend's house, offering to bring a dish to contribute that you know that you can have.
Yeah.
And when all else fails, developing the confidence in yourself that it's okay to just bring your like a Tupperware container with food in it and eat it. Like it comes back to social norms, and we're always thinking about what other people are thinking about us. Oh, it would be rude if I said no to the birthday cake, or it would be rude if I pulled out my own container of food in a restaurant, or, you know, but open and honesty it always comes back to that for me. Because if you can just tell the people around you what's going on, you don't need to get into like personal gory details. You just need to say like, hey, I have some health things going on. I'm eating a certain way because it makes me feel really good. And so I brought my own food today. And just leave it at that. Like people are not going to keep pressing you. If you just give them the information that they're looking for, they're going to drop it.
You're so right. And, you know, it's so interesting too, because I have a couple friends that have autoimmune diseases as well, and they have brought in their own food to like restaurants. And I think it's important to recognize too, it's not a judgment. It's just being able to have that open, honest conversation and being vulnerable. And the people that care about you, they're going to have no problem with it. They're going to be like, okay, no problem. They're going to want you to feel good because they don't want to see you in pain or any like frustrations that you're going through. But recognizing too, it's creating it as a social norm, like being able to have those conversations and not making it taboo. I think that's important.
Yeah.
But I've so enjoyed this conversation so far, Whitney, but we're going to jump into the rapid fire questions if you're ready for them.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. The first question is, what motivates you to work smarter?
Like we talked about before, work-life balance, being able to have a business that can support my family and also having super present quality time with them where I'm not thinking about work.
Yes, no, it's absolutely that integration of the two, where time goes, the priorities and everything along those lines.
Yes.
And if you were a superhero, what would be your power or powers?
This one was a harder one for me to think of. And I think what I would want to be able to do is have people recognize their best qualities. So I would just go like this and they'd like know what their best top qualities are.
I love that. I think it just, you know, everyone has something so unique about them, but I like to highlight that. That's what this channel is all about, like highlighting incredible women like yourself.
Thank you.
Of course. And what is the last book that you read? I know we talked about a book, but is that the last one or do you have a recenter one?
I'm reading Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich.
I love that one.
Yeah, it's a great book for anybody. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. It just helps you think outside of literally the box that we live in.
Yes. No, it's a book you reread and reread. I've read it probably like 5 or 6 times. I just reread it like a few months ago, but it's a good reminder to read it again because it just like puts you in a different mindset too, depending on the phase of life you're in as well. But it's a phenomenal book. So I second that as well. And what is your favorite way to spend a day off? So if you aren't seeing clients, you aren't doing anything for your business, what are you doing?
I love the beach. So soaking up the sun. I love going to little cafes, like coffee shops, have a latte or an iced coffee. I like to like peruse around the neighborhood, maybe like pop into a few shops, just really casual, but always spent with, you know, loved ones, friends.
Sounds like the perfect day. I definitely can relate. But Whitney, this has been such a lovely conversation. I'm so honored that you got to come on today. But if you could tell everybody where they can find you, hire you, we're going to link everything below. But if you could let us know too.
Sure. So I work one-on-one right now with clients on the diet, lifestyle, and mindset aspects of healing from autoimmune or chronic illness. You can find all of my social links on my website. It's whitneycoupland.com, and Coupland is Coupland.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you for sharing your journey, the ups, downs, everything in between, and all the success you've had with clients, but really from your own experience and how you're able to help so many others as well. I know everybody watching is really going to take away something incredible from what you said today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment below. What was the biggest takeaway from Whitney? I'm sure she would love to read it as well. And we'll see you on the next video.